"What are you doing here?" The words escaped as barely a whisper. Even I was shocked by how broken my voice sounded. I had just returned from a 2-month medical mission with mobile healthcare teams, traveling through remote Appalachian communities where the nearest hospital could be hours away on winding mountain roads. I unlocked the door to my condo, dreaming of silence and a hot shower. Instead, I found something that made my blood run cold. 2 people were sprawled across my couch in my living room, acting as if they owned the place. My parents. When they turned at the sound of my voice, there wasn't a flicker of shame on their faces. Instead, they looked almost pleased, as if welcoming me back from a weekend trip. "Oh, Valerie. Sweetheart, you're home early." Mom closed the book in her lap with a satisfied smile. "I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow. You must be exhausted from the drive," Dad added with such casual concern, as if I'd just stopped by their house for dinner. Their calmness was more devastating than any argument could have been. This was my home, my sanctuary, the place I was returning to for the first time in 2 months, gripping my suitcase handle until my knuckles turned white. I stepped further into the living room. "How did you even get in here?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it kept cracking. Mom waved her hand dismissively, as if I were overreacting. "Oh, honey, don't look so upset. Remember when you moved in, you gave the property management company our contact information as an emergency backup, just in case something happened to you?" "That's right," Dad chimed in. "We were worried sick. You were traveling through God knows where in those mountains. We hadn't heard from you in 3 days. Your mother was beside herself. I had to call the management office." Mom continued, her voice dripping with theatrical concern. "I was crying on the phone. My daughter lost her keys. I told them, 'Please, you have to help.' And this wonderful locksmith Bob, I think his name was, he came right over. I paid him. Of course. Don't worry about that." She said it with such pride, as if she deserved an award for resourcefulness. Cold sweat broke out across my forehead. They had used my emergency contact information, lied to the property manager, tricked a locksmith into breaking into my apartment, and were now presenting it as an act of parental love. "But where did you get a key?" I managed to ask. Mom triumphantly pulled a set of keys from her purse. "Oh, we found your spare in the hallway closet. I took it to that hardware store on 5th Street and had a copy made. Why shouldn't parents have a key to their daughter's place? We've been stopping by to dust and keep things tidy for you." A spare key. Without asking, they had violated every boundary, lied to get inside, copied my key, and were now calling it parental duty. The people sitting in front of me suddenly seemed like strangers. "You did all this without even asking me, Valerie. We're your parents." Mom threw her hands up. "What's wrong with family dropping by? Are you going to treat us like strangers now? There are no strangers in family." I'd heard that line my entire life. They'd always been like this. My bedroom, my diary, my personal belongings. Nothing was ever truly mine. Boundaries were a foreign concept to them. That's exactly why I'd bought this condo, to escape their suffocating care. Then I noticed the other changes. The walls were covered with tacky framed prints, cheap reproductions in gaudy gold frames. The balcony was crammed with plastic planters filled with wilting petunias. And on the coffee table, an empty bottle. That bottle. The aged Napa Valley wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. A housewarming gift from my nursing supervisor, a rare vintage I'd planned to open on my first anniversary in this place. "The wine," I whispered, unable to believe it. Dad followed my gaze and shrugged carelessly. "Oh, that was excellent. Since you were coming home, we thought we'd celebrate. No point in letting good wine go to waste." It seemed wrong to let it just sit there. Something inside me broke. That bottle represented everything I'd worked for. 10 years of brutal double shifts. No vacations. Saving every dollar. And here it was, my home. my special bottle consumed as casually as if it were cheap grocery store wine. As if it had always belonged to them. I slowly set down my suitcase and pointed toward the door. Get out. What Mom's face twisted in confusion. Both of you. Now. This is my home. I bought it with my money. With my hard work. It's my property. You had no right to make keys. Enter without permission. Rearrange my furniture. Or drink my wine. My voice no longer trembled. Valerie Marie, how dare you speak to your parents this way? Dad jumped up from the couch. After everything we've done for me, I interrupted. Everything you've done would be for me if you'd actually respected my boundaries. If you'd stayed out of my life and let me be an adult. But this isn't for me. This is for you because you still want to control me. For the first time in my life, my parents looked at me as if I were a rebellious stranger rather than their daughter. Their shocked faces pierced me with pain. But I couldn't back down. If I didn't draw the line now, I'd suffocate, put the keys on the table and leave. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then Mom started crying. Dad muttered something under his breath. The door slammed like a gunshot. I forced myself to remain standing as I looked around the empty living room. Daki prints. Plastic flowers. An empty wine bottle. Was this really my sanctuary? Let me tell you how I got here. I work as a senior nurse in the emergency department at Providence Memorial Hospital. Every shift is like a battlefield trauma calls. Critical patients. Split-second decisions. Through all that chaos, I held on to one dream, a place of my own, where no one could intrude. From my first day at the hospital at age 22, I worked like a woman possessed. While my friends vacationed in Miami and Las Vegas, I picked up night shifts. While they updated their wardrobes, I squirreled away every penny. My friends called me obsessed. I didn't care. I had a goal, my own home. 10 years later, that dream became reality. A brand new condo in the Harborview Towers in downtown Portland. Corner unit with a view of the waterfront. I remember my hands shaking as I signed the closing papers at the title company. When I received the keys, I nearly cried right there in the real estate office. This home was the embodiment of a decade of sacrifice. I bought it outright, no mortgage, through years of relentless saving. My favorite feature was the balcony. Morning coffee, watching the sunrise over the harbor, pure bliss. Right after closing, I fulfilled my second dream, volunteering with mobile medical teams in rural Appalachia, in communities with no paved roads or reliable internet, where the closest thing to healthcare was a traveling nurse practitioner. The grateful smiles of local families reminded me why I'd become a nurse in the first place. And now, returning with a full heart, I found everything violated. This is my home, I whispered, clenching my fists like a mantra. Mine. No time for sentimentality. If I wanted to protect my sanctuary, I needed to act. I pulled out my phone and found a 24-hour locksmith service. By nightfall, my fortress would be secure again. After the locks were changed, weeks of uneasy calm followed. Silence from my parents. I savored the peace I'd paid so dearly for. The weight of my new keys in my pocket reminded me daily that this wasn't a nightmare, it had really happened. And I'd stood my ground. Then my phone rang. Sarah, my younger sister. Unlike me, Sarah had always been the peacemaker, always trying to please our parents. Sobs came through the line. Val, Michael and I are breaking up. Michael was wonderful, kind, dependable, genuine. They'd been together for 2 years. Why you two were perfect together. It's because of Mom and Dad. Sarah's voice broke as she told me the story. They kept showing up at our apartment, multiple times a week. No warning. No calls. They'd criticize Michael's software developer's salary, not enough for a real man. They'd say. They demanded to know when we were having kids. When we were getting married. He finally couldn't take it anymore. She quoted his final words. I love you, Sarah. But I can't start a family with your parents included in every decision. The lease is in his name. I have to move out. I'm never going back to Mom and Dad's house. Val, can I stay with you for a while? Of course I said yes. In that suffocating childhood home where personal space meant nothing, Sarah had been my only ally. We both knew what it meant to live under the weight of controlling love. Besides, the condo had felt lonely. Living with Sarah turned out to be a joy. After brutal shifts, she'd greet me with tea and genuine interest in my day. On weekends, we'd try new recipes or binge-watch shows together. We naively thought the worst was over. The storm hit on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after Sarah moved in. That day, the ER handled a major highway pileup with multiple casualties. I didn't get home until after 2 p.m. Sarah was dozing on the couch but woke the moment I walked in. Guilt was written all over her face. Val, they came today. My heart dropped. Did you let them in? No, not on purpose. Sarah was nearly in tears. I've been ignoring their calls, so they wouldn't find out where I was. Then yesterday I got a text. If you don't tell us where you are, we'll come to your workplace and talk to your principal. Can you imagine? At the elementary school where I teach, she'd panicked and told them she was staying with me. Pure blackmail. Sweet, Sarah never stood a chance against that kind of manipulation. This afternoon, the concierge called up, said I had guests. I said I wasn't expecting anyone. But Mom told him, "We're Valerie Harper's parents. We have an important package for our daughter." He let them through. The story continued. At my door, they changed their tune. "Just let us see Sarah for a minute. We came all this way." I couldn't say no. They pushed inside. Said they'd just have some water and wait for you. It took me 30 minutes to get them to leave. I didn't blame her. I knew better than anyone how masterfully they manipulated people. It's okay. Thanks for warning me. I took a deep breath and headed to my bedroom. I froze in the doorway. Everything was in perfect order. But not my order. Books on the nightstand arranged alphabetically. Clothes in the closet organized by color like a department store display. Mom's obsessive need for proper organization had invaded my most private space. But the real violation, my old journal, the one I'd hidden in a back drawer, was now displayed on the bookshelf like a trophy. Blood drained from my face. While Sarah had been in the kitchen, they'd rifled through my most personal possessions. Then I noticed something worse. The bottom drawer of my desk, where I kept my important documents, the deed, closing papers, title insurance, property tax records. The drawer was slightly ajar. With trembling hands, I pulled out the folder. The papers had clearly been examined. They weren't arranged the way I'd left them. The realization hit like a freight train. This wasn't just tidying up. They'd been looking for something specific. A wave of rage washed over me. I returned to the living room. Sarah looked ready to cry. "I'm so sorry. Val." I was in the kitchen making coffee. And Mom said, "The bedroom's such a mess. I'll just straighten it up a bit." I didn't think. Her trembling voice brought me back to reality. I'd almost snapped at my sister, but caught myself. Sarah was the real victim here. Her kindness had been cynically exploited. I sat beside her and pulled her into a hug. "This isn't your fault. Do you hear me? It's never your fault. The fault lies with people who lie and manipulate. But if I hadn't opened the door, no." I shook my head firmly. If it hadn't been today, they would have found another way tomorrow. They've always been like this. Sarah shuddered. We both remembered our wonderful childhood. How Mom had read Sarah's first love letter aloud at family dinner. "You don't date losers like this," she'd pronounced. Sarah cried for a week. How Dad had installed monitoring software on my laptop for my safety when I was 17. How nothing was ever truly ours. To them, we'll always be helpless children, I said quietly. They genuinely believe our lives are their property. But Sarah, it's time to stop allowing it. We have to set boundaries ourselves. My sister nodded. The guilt in her eyes shifted to determination. She would stand with me. The next day, everything became clear. During my lunch break, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Harper, This is Jennifer from Cascade Realty. Your father contacted us about getting an appraisal on your condo at Harborview Towers. He said he was your authorized representative. When would be convenient for us to schedule the walkthrough? The phone nearly slipped from my hand. My father was calling real estate agents behind my back, claiming to represent me. Fear battled with fury. But I couldn't let panic show. There must be some mistake. I haven't given anyone power of attorney. And I'm not planning to sell. Oh. That's odd. He was quite insistent that he was acting on your behalf. The agent sounded confused. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. What the hell was happening? Was this just obsessive interference? Or were they actually planning something I needed information? Asking them directly would be pointless. They'd just lie. I called Aunt Gloria, Dad's sister, the only relative who occasionally called them out on their behavior. Aunt Gloria. Hi. It's been too long. Listen. Has Dad mentioned anything about real estate lately? Maybe looking at properties. Heavy sigh on the other end. Valerie. How did you know? He called me last week. She hesitated, but sensing the seriousness, continued. He's convinced you can't afford that condo. Says you need to sell it and buy something more appropriate, meaning smaller and closer to them, where they can keep an eye on you. He said. Valerie's naive. As her parents, we need to guide her. I told him you're a grown woman who can make her own decisions. He got angry and hung up on me. The final puzzle piece clicked into place. The realtor's call. The rifled documents. The conversation with Aunt Gloria. This wasn't paranoia. My parents were actively planning to force me to give up the home that represented 10 years of my life. After hanging up, I stared at my phone. I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I scrolled through my contacts and found the name I needed. Nathan. My boyfriend Nathan. A real estate attorney. We'd been dating for 6 months. My finger hovered over the call button. Then I pressed it. Nathan. I need help. I can't do this by myself anymore. He listened silently to my halting story. Then said calmly, Val. Stop fighting this alone. Before we go the legal route, let's try one more conversation. But this time, I'll be there. I can't describe how much those steady words calmed me. He wasn't suggesting another emotional confrontation. He was offering clear explanation from a legal perspective. The meeting location was carefully chosen, not my place. Not their house. But a conference room at his law firm in the Columbia Center downtown. On the day of the meeting, my parents arrived, looking like they'd been dragged there against their will, making it clear they resented their daughter, summoning them anywhere. Nathan didn't waste time on pleasantries. Thank you for coming. Let's get straight to the point from a legal standpoint. He placed a copy of my property deed on the table. Valerie Harper holds 100% ownership of the condominium at Harborview Towers. This is indisputable fact. Under Oregon property law, an owner has the exclusive right to control access to their property. Entering someone else's home without the owner's consent constitutes criminal trespass under Oregon Revised Statute 164. 245. Dad's face turned red. Who do you think you are? Some lawyer punk telling us we're criminals for visiting our daughter, Dad. Nathan's right. I forced myself to speak evenly. This is my home. And contacting real estate agents claiming to represent me, that could constitute fraud. Fraud mam looked horrified. We're just trying to help. You've made a terrible financial decision. And someone needs to protect you from yourself. I don't need protecting, my voice cracked. I need you to respect that I'm an adult, who can make my own choices. I need my life back. But neither my words nor Nathan's calm legal explanations reached them. Mom dissolved into tears. How can our own daughter do this to us? After everything we've sacrificed, Dad held firm. It's a parent's right to guide their children. And this boyfriend of yours is just filling your head with lies. The meeting collapsed. As he stormed out, Dad threw over his shoulder. If that's how you want it. Fine. We have our own methods. We'll show you what family loyalty really means. A chill ran down my spine. That wasn't just anger talking. That was a threat. A few days later, I learned it wasn't an empty threat. That evening, Sarah called, her voice thick with terror. Val, this is bad. They're here. With movers. What I'm calling Nathan. We're coming now. We raced home. My heart pounding the entire drive. My parents' car and a moving truck were parked at the entrance to my building. The plan was crystal clear: remove my belongings and prepare the condo for sale. Thankfully, Sarah was inside and hadn't opened the door. Outside, my father was arguing with a locksmith, claiming to be the owner's representative and demanding he pick the lock. "Dad, stop," I shouted as I ran up. He turned. And for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not anger. Not even stubbornness. Desperation. He genuinely believed he was saving me. "Valeria, just listen to reason. You can't afford this place. We're doing what's best. This is my home." My voice echoed off the building walls. "You have no right. We have every right. We're your parents." Nathan stepped forward. "Sir, you need to stop immediately. What you're attempting is illegal. Stay out of this." "You manipulative." There was no time to waste. This had gone too far. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "I need police. My parents are attempting to break into my home with a moving crew." That call ended our relationship forever. By the time police arrived, it was chaos. Dad was shouting at the locksmith. Mom was pounding on the door, sobbing and screaming my name. The moving crew stood by their truck, confused. Neighbors had gathered on every floor, watching the drama unfold. I calmly explained the situation to the responding officers. Nathan provided documentation, property deed, records of the previous unauthorized entry, and most importantly, video footage from the security camera he'd recommended I install after the first break-in. The video clearly showed my father attempting to coerce a locksmith into breaking into my home. I'll never forget my parents' faces when the police began questioning them. They genuinely didn't understand they were committing a crime. In their minds, they were saving me from my own poor decisions. I watched as they were escorted to separate police cars for questioning. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ultimately, my parents were charged with attempted criminal trespass and filing a false report claiming to be my representative. After consultation with the district attorney, and given it was their first offense and the family circumstances, they were offered a plea deal. The charges would be reduced to misdemeanors with no jail time if they completed mandatory family counseling and agreed to a restraining order. They accepted. The court issued a restraining order 100 feet from my residence. No direct contact regarding my property. No contact through third parties to harass or coerce me. The physical threat was over, but the emotional wound remained. I'd called the police on my own parents. Part of me felt like a traitor. Part of me felt liberated. Mostly, I just felt exhausted. Nathan was my rock through it all. He handled every legal detail and never left my side during the court proceedings. On his advice, Sarah and I started seeing Dr. Patricia Chen, a family therapist at a counseling center near the university. During those sessions, we finally unpacked our childhood trauma, a childhood where our worth was measured solely by obedience to our parents' expectations, a youth where privacy was non-existent, parents whose version of love denied us any independence or autonomy. What you experienced is called enmeshment. Dr. Chen explained in our third session. Your parents never developed appropriate boundaries between themselves and their children. In their minds, you're extensions of them, not separate individuals. Can people like that change? Sarah asked quietly. With intensive therapy, sometimes. But the change has to come from them, not from you trying to fix them. Your job now is to heal yourselves. The therapist's words saved me. Your actions weren't cruelty, they were self-defense. Setting boundaries isn't rejection. It's healthy and necessary. It requires respect for yourself and the other person. Those words became my mantra. A few months after the restraining order was issued, Aunt Gloria shared an update. The court-mandated therapy seems to be helping. Your mother actually admitted for the first time ever that maybe she went a little overboard. That's huge for her. The incident spread through the entire extended family. Many relatives reached out to express their support. Some even shared their own stories of my parents' boundary violations over the years. Others stopped speaking to my parents entirely, which seemed to finally make them realize how serious their actions had been. Whispers followed them everywhere at church, at the grocery store, in their neighborhood. Mom, once respected in her community as a devoted mother, now faced sideways glances and hushed conversations. According to Aunt Gloria, that social consequence affected them more than the legal one. 2 years have passed since that terrible day. My life has been filled with a peace I couldn't have imagined before. I don't speak to my parents. The restraining order expired after 1 year. But there's been no attempt at contact. Aunt Gloria says they're continuing therapy voluntarily now. Their therapist apparently told them that any reconciliation would have to be initiated by Sarah and me. When and if we're ready. Maybe someday. But not yet. I choose my peace. Sarah now rents a studio in the building next door. Every weekend we have dinner at her place or mine. She's dating again a gentle art teacher she met at a coffee shop. I've never seen her so happy. Nathan and I got engaged last Christmas. We're getting married this spring in a small ceremony at the Japanese garden. Just close friends. Sarah. And Aunt Gloria. My parents won't be there. And I'm okay with that. Finally, my condo has become a true home. Not just a roof over my head, but a symbol of independence, boundaries, and a life built on my own terms. Sometimes I stand on that balcony with my morning coffee, watching the sunrise over the harbor, and I think about that empty wine bottle, the one that started everything. It was never really about the wine. It was about ownership, about respect, about the right to live your own life without someone else controlling every decision. I bought a new bottle to replace that one. Nathan and I plan to open it on our wedding day. This time, I'll be the one who decides when and how it's opened. And that makes all the difference. Story due. I gave my fiancé a surprise dream. To the soul. A honeymoon. In front of her family. She burnt the tickets and labeled them, sad, loser trash. Unlike you. My ex understands what true romance looks like. She had no clue what was going to happen after I went. Reddit. Hello. At her sister's party, my fiancé made fun of the honeymoon vacation I had saved 8 months for, and then revealed she was going to Italy with her ex. The issue is that when you're the person who handles everyone's papers for free, it didn't work out well for them. I'm Nick, a 32-year-old man. For 7 years, I have been handling permits in Denver. Instead, than letting your building project languish in some bureaucratic black hole, I'm the man who gets it approved by the city. It's not a glamorous career, but it pays well. Alyssa, my now ex-fiancé, grew up in Cherry Hills Village, which is known to non-Denver residents as oil money masquerading as old money. Half of the downtown office buildings are owned by her father, Charlie. Claudia, her mother, drives whichever high-end SUV she has on hand that week. Sister Fiona just married a computer guy who believes that having a personality is a must for giving advice on cryptocurrency. From day one, they had been treating me like a hired servant. Charlie would make these passive-aggressive remarks regarding pensioners and the mindset of government employees. Claudia would inquire about my work as if I had disclosed my cancer diagnosis. Fiona connected me to Nick, a friend of Alyssa's. For example, she would lose her social standing if she revealed that I was her lover. The problem with being undervalued, however, is this. In fact, it's helpful. While they were busy looking down on the government worker, I was quietly becoming the man who handled all their paperwork difficulties. Elisa's freelance design license, Fiona's business belongings, and Charlie's real estate firms. I was more knowledgeable about their financial status than their fucking accountants. I'm getting ahead of myself. However, so wait. Alyssa seems to have changed. Said that she admired my stability and genuineness in contrast to the trust fund kids she had dated. said that her family's preoccupation with money was flimsy, that she was more interested in who I was than what I produced. Ott should have been more aware. After some time, I began to notice the warning signals. Because we couldn't afford impromptu travel, she would get strange when others spoke about their travels to Europe. How? Since our budget was humiliating, she would sidestep inquiries regarding wedding plans. How her eyes glowed every time Blake was brought up. And because he was still reportedly a family friend. It occurred often. Blake is an investing man who owns a high-end watch and drives a German vehicle. Alyssa said they were simply friends now. But I could see how she would find excuses to contact him for financial advice and laugh too loudly at his market forecasts. Additionally, I was unable to stop it since the man and his family knew Alyssa's parents, which made matters worse. Anyway, I made a choice 8 months ago. I was going to play chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Not because I was giving up. You see, Korea was Alyssa's obsession. Korean BBQ. Skincare regimens. K-dramas, you name it. Since we first began dating, she had been discussing Seoul. Even have boards on Pinterest about it. It was her ideal location. I thus began organizing a well-researched trip that would wow her. Not just a mediocre holiday. I identified Seoul's peak seasons, created a flawless 10-day plan that addressed every issue she had ever brought up, reserved a hotel with city views in Myeongdong, got us tour places in the DMZ. Gwangjang Market is crawling with planned night markets. In order to get those Instagram-worthy views of the cityscape, they even indulged in supper at Lauderworld Tower. Bameyuan. 400 inches total, which required me to use all of my savings and some credit. However, I produced this comprehensive plan complete with pictures, schedule, and contingency plans. That was planning at the professional level. It was an easy strategy. Show her that I could provide something her trust money pals couldn't equal as a surprise at Fiona's engagement party. This was supposed to be my chance to witness their arrogant grins shatter when they learned I'd been playing a longer game. Never in my life have I been more mistaken about anything. The event took place in an exposed brick location in Low that charges high prices for an industrial atmosphere. Blake was among the roughly 30 individuals who had reportedly drove down from his Aspen vacation in order to network or whatever. I listened to him lecture for an hour on crypto tactics, and Alyssa paid close attention to everything he said, as if he were picking lottery numbers. Even though my jaw was tightening, I maintained my composure and let them perform. Waited till the toasts were finished. Everyone had drinks. Ideal audience for my major disclosure. I cleared my throat and took out the folder with all of the confirmations. Hello, everyone. I wanted to let you know about our excited plans for our honeymoon. The discussion ceased. Alyssa seems intrigued yet unenthusiastic. I should have seen the first warning sign. As if I were delivering a lecture, I began to describe Seoul. As I study her expression, I anticipate the response that any ordinary person would have if their ideal vacation were presented to them in a palatable manner. Rather, I saw her face change from one of bewilderment to one of someone who had just tasted spoiled milk. Redder with every affirmation. She grasped the folder and flipped through the pages as if she were looking at evidence at a murder scene. Watching this catastrophe play out in real time, the whole crowd became silent. Then, while everyone stared, she gave me a disgusted look and said, "Are you freaking serious right now?" As I stood there, I realized that I had just entered an ambush that I had not even anticipated. Do you think I want this? Like we're college students on spring break. Some pitiful loser crap about tourist traps and street food. The quiet was overwhelming. Claudia began to giggle, saying, "Soul, what am I? Some weeb who gets excited about eating weird stuff at night markets." Blake was attempting to conceal his snicker behind his glass when he said, "Oh, honey, even your high school boyfriend had better taste than this." Fiona was shaking her head as if she had anticipated this catastrophe. Alyssa wasn't finished. However, after grabbing the confirmations, she headed toward the ornamental fireplace. She turned to the audience and said, "You want to know what real romance looks like? then made eye contact with Blake. "Babe, tell them about the proposal for the Amalfi Coast." This lady just called her ex-babe in front of her fiancé in front of 30 people with zero shame. Blake stood up, now rather intrigued. "Well, the resort on the cliff in Positano, with the infinity pool and view of the Mediterranean, was what I had in mind. You see, Alyssa whirled back at me. That's how you organize your ideal honeymoon. Not this bullshit about anime conventions. My ambitions were put on hold by her. Your pitiful dreams are over." Everyone at the party began to applaud. She received a standing ovation from 30 people for brutally destroying me. From the shock, I simply stood there watching 4 years of my life, and every dime I'd saved burn up in physical flames. Rather of losing it or being emotional. Something just clicked. I added, "Enjoy the show," in a level voice. After that, I left. I was followed to the parking garage by Mason. He is the only good person at the party and my closest buddy. He always takes pictures as he records everything. He seemed shell-shocked. "Dude," he replied. "I got all of it on video. The whole fucking show." I advised him to keep those pictures. This is what Alyssa and her little audience didn't realize about me. And it made me realize that I would need them. I'm not sentimental. I locate weak points and exert pressure until the material burns itself. They were interested in seeing my true abilities. Go for it. My analytical mind really took over on the journey home. It had nothing to do with the honeymoon. Until something better came up. This was regarded as a valid backup plan for around 4 years. And Blake. This wasn't impromptu, based on how well choreographed that performance was. They had been preparing this departure strategy. I had just provided them with the ideal public justification to make advantage of it. Arrived home at 10 o'clock. To a vacant flat. Excellent. I wanted some emotional noise, free time to ponder. I began making the connections I had been too blind to see. Such as the fact that Alyssa never paid rent, even though she had access to the trust money. How she had been working late more often, and using evasive justifications. She claimed to have been answering confidential calls regarding wedding suppliers. Around midnight, a few calls were missed at first. And then they became frequent. The party had become a celebration of Alyssa and Blake's love reunion, based on background sounds. But here's what they don't comprehend. My energy source is information. And over the course of 4 years, I had evolved into the man behind the scenes, managing the legal matters for their whole social circle. Alyssa's freelance design license and documentation services. Fiona's company registration. And Charlie's real estate businesses. I had been the friendly local official who took care of everyone's problems without ever requesting payment, just plain human decency. They overlooked the fact that you may create fascinating issues in people's businesses if you have a strong grasp of systems and a strong desire to betray others. The voicemails continued to arrive. Alyssa went between defending her behavior and becoming defensive when even she saw how irrational her justifications were. One stated, "I thought you knew me better than to plan something so basic." Another, "Blake has been urging Italy for months, but I have always refused out of devotion. Baby, I know you might be mad, but you should have asked what I actually wanted, instead of assuming. I've come to the realization that I deserve someone who appreciates quality after tonight." But the 300 a.m. The messages differed. Abruptly apologizing. Saying maybe she overreacted. Asking if we could speak about this when she came home. Imploring me to respond, because she was growing anxious about my silence. Her tone altered. And I understand why. At that gathering, someone ought to have informed her of the practical considerations she had overlooked in her haste to disparage me in public. For example, our lease simply has my name on it. Such as me managing her papers and her company being registered at my location. Because I studied the terms and conditions and she found paperwork tedious. Half of our wedding providers have contracts in my name. And she has been leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Sunday was a really fruitful day for me as I looked into Blake's new business ventures and our joint responsibilities. Yes, that was not something I was going to overlook. The thing is this. The permission man makes people feel at ease. They ask you to clarify regulatory requirements, assist with compliance difficulties, and examine contracts. You turn into the person who really knows how systems operate. Blake, for example, manages client funds in some innovative ways that may not be entirely consistent with industry norms. You may see trends in how people respond to advice when you assist them in understanding municipal investment restrictions for their real estate transactions. The Department of Labor might learn a lot from Fiona's new husband's intriguing approaches to contractor categorization. Most significantly, in an effort to increase rental revenue, Charlie's commercial buildings have been actively eschewing code compliance. I ought to be aware, for modifications that were finished substantially differently from what was permitted. I assisted him in navigating the permission procedures. Sunday night, I made a choice that felt like icy water coursing through my veins. I wouldn't stand up for someone who considered me throwaway entertainment. But I also wouldn't make things easy for those who found it funny to make fun of me. It was going to be an intriguing Monday. Korean Air is the first call. When I informed that one guest would no longer be going owing to relationship changes, I was surprisingly understanding of customer service. Due to the fact that we had beyond the 30-day deadline, tickets were half refundable. Sanmei yen. 200 of the $4. 800 I had spent on airfares was reimbursed. It was more difficult to reserve the hotel at the non-refundable rate. But for a modest charge, I was able to switch to single occupancy, even though it was still pricey. It was my sole vacation, rather than our disastrous honeymoon. With 48 hours notice, the DMZ trip is entirely refundable. There is no penalty for canceling the Lotta Tower meal. Mason was moved to the night market food tour. In any case, he had always wanted to go to Korea. By Monday afternoon, I had reorganized everything around a vacation that was really going to be amazing and had recovered almost 60% of my expenses. However, the actual task was just getting started. Alyssa seemed to have been struck by reality, like a freight train when she returned home on Monday night. Most likely because it had. She came at me as if I were a deadly animal. Began by saying, "We need to talk about what occurred. I know you're unhappy." Making gestures in the direction of the sofa, as if we were ready to discuss sentiments. I stood at the counter in the kitchen. She began her planned statement by expressing her surprise at the honeymoon arrangements. How her sophisticated sensitivities seemed to be beyond my comprehension. How the whole situation seemed like I was attempting to impose an unauthentic, foreign, adventure-like version of her. You had to see how it seemed. Even if I overreacted. Tourist sites and street cuisine were very unprofessional. I gave her 10 minutes to vent. I then asked her to elaborate on the Amalfi Coast remark and the reference to calling Blake babe. Her mask broke instantly. We became defensive, saying that Blake had casually brought up Italy as a friend's proposal, and that she had simply done so to show what smart preparation looked like. She couldn't help herself when I asked her what made my planning so simple. Explained for 5 minutes. Precisely why someone of her caliber would not be satisfied with my honeymoon. Instagram was terrible for Seoul. How could she upload pictures that would make others jealous? I had planned simple tourist activities that wouldn't generate social media interaction. Although Korean culture was popular at the time, it wasn't classic enough for a milestone celebration. Blake is aware of how crucial events that make for good photos are to your social media profile. There are places on his Italy itinerary that would really wow my buddies. It was there. I wasn't a fiancé who had spent months saving for her ideal vacation. I was a fiancé who failed to see that her aspirations should be ostentatious and glamorous rather than sentimental or profound. She continued expressing this like it was good business reasoning. She tried to backtrack after becoming agitated, when I explicitly inquired whether she intended to call off our engagement for Blake. All they were was buddies. Italy wasn't being serious. She just uttered things she didn't intend because she was upset. However, she then revealed that Blake had been assisting her in figuring out what she really desired in a mate, and that they had been communicating more often about her worries about our relationship. Excellent. While living rent-free in my apartment, my fiancé had been utilizing her ex as a relationship counselor, allowing him to persuade her that she deserved more. The humiliation in public wasn't an accident. Blake had been guiding her toward this escape plan for months. I advised her to remain someplace else while we worked things out, telling her that I needed time to think things through. She went into a panic right away. Where should I be working? How should I conduct meetings with clients? What about correspondence sent to this address for commercial purposes? I then clarified that an address I controlled was mentioned on her business registration. She had never established a legitimate company address. Thus, the majority of her professional contact came here, and I had offered my paperwork services as a courtesy rather than as required by law. Since she was reevaluating our partnership agreement, I mentioned that she may wish to manage her own administrative duties moving ahead. She became upset and insisted on knowing whether I was threatening to ruin her company out of retaliation. I wasn't threatening anything. I was simply letting her know that she may want to think about the real-world effects of whatever choice she was making for our future. I called her after she went to stay with her friend Sarah. I started by telling our landlord that my roommate's circumstances were changing and verifying the requirements for single occupancy. Next, to wedding suppliers, at least those I have a deal with. The most crucial call was to Alyssa's largest customer, a marketing company that gave her a reliable source of cash. I identified myself as her current registered agent and that they may want to check the terms of the contract and the payment methods because of company restructuring. As it happened, they had been worried about Alyssa's dependability lately. In any case, they were intrigued to find out that her firm registration may be going through administrative changes. Around 11 p.m., Alyssa phoned, outright hysterical. She had been called by a customer who wanted to know more about her company situation. She was accusing me of undermining her career and demanded to know what I had told them. I clarified that I was doing my responsibilities as her registered agent. She should manage her own company infrastructure first if she wished to manage professional interactions on her own. I don't take calls from individuals who publicly embarrass me for amusement. But she hasn't stopped since. I'm working hard to be ready for the next part of my answer. I will be removing my address from her business license and resigning as her registered agent tomorrow. Perfectly legal. Perfectly professional. And extremely heartbreaking to someone who never cared to understand how her own company worked. Mason arrived on Tuesday, with beverages in a folder that resembled a case file from a federal inquiry, saying, "Dude, you need to see this stuff." He spread pictures like a detective across my kitchen table. I got everything. The whole performance time-stamped with clear shots of everyone who was laughing at your expense. The pictures were awful. My honeymoon plans are on hold because of Alyssa. The audience cheered my embarrassment. Blake's arrogant look. In fact, Claudia was laughing and pointing. Mason had a comprehensive list of all the witnesses and had recorded the whole incident from several perspectives. I've been making inquiries. This was not an impromptu moment. This hit was prearranged. For weeks, Fiona has been warning people that you were about to humiliate yourself with a pitiful proposal update that would finally reveal your true nature. For weeks, they had been preparing for this ambush. For optimum entertainment, they had planned their reaction, arranged their audience, and staged my annihilation. After I departed, Mason took out other pictures from his phone that seemed to show Alyssa and Blake having a very private moment near the bar. I also received a video. Even if the audio isn't flawless, you can see enough to know precisely what occurred. We built a timeline and examined everything for an hour. Mason's meticulous record-keeping had produced an impeccable account of deliberate humiliation. I submitted my resignation documents as a registered agent to the state on Wednesday morning. Changes in commercial ties are always handled according to standard practice. Instant processing of the forms meant that a crucial component was now missing from Alyssa's company registration. Additionally, I informed her via certified letters that I was no longer taking legal paperwork on her company's behalf at my flat, which was her business address. With quick effect, just to make sure she gets the right notice, she copied her largest customer. Then, about the lease, I gave Ryder Properties a call. I clarified the conditions for single occupancy and said that my roommate's position was changing. In fact, the property management was helpful. It seems that they would rather deal with a single, accountable rentier. In any case, I gave Alyssa a formal notice at Sarah's that afternoon. Extremely professional. Strictly adhering to Colorado's residential tenancy requirements, she was effectively a long-term visitor since she wasn't on the lease. And I was giving her 30 days to get her possessions back and find another somewhere to live. Her face became white, and she began to stutter about having rights. About having lived there for 2 years, and about how I couldn't simply throw her out. Calmly, I clarified that she had only ever been a visitor of mine and had never been a renter. That agreement was coming to an end. Just as our relationship was. Everything is recorded and lawful. She argued, then negotiated, and eventually broke down in tears. Asked how I could be so uncaring about leaving her without a place to live. Blake seemed willing to assist her with her housing predicament when I reminded her that she had made the decision to publicly embarrass me. Perhaps a security deposit might be covered somewhere in his Amalfi Coast budget. She received a call from her customer on Thursday morning. Her contract was being immediately terminated. It seems that having your company address contested and your registered agent quit raises severe concerns about professionalism and stability. She was really insane when she phoned on Thursday afternoon. Why in the world are you acting this way? My life is being destroyed by you. How could one mistake make you so vindictive? Hi. Alyssa. You dare not say hello to me. All right. Alyssa. Goodbye. Mom F. Before she could continue, I hung up. But not before hearing Blake inquire what was wrong in the background. It seemed that the reality of providing for a jobless fiancé who had no credit history and no company revenue was complicating his romantic plans for a vacation in Italy. Fiona texted me Friday afternoon. She felt that I was being too vengeful against her sister and was dissatisfied in the way I was handling the problem. Said that the family had always welcomed me and that this was not the appropriate approach to address a straightforward miscommunication. I took a screen grab of her text and stored it in an evidence folder. I had a feeling I would need to record their attitude for the following step. Because the Department of Labor could be interested in some of the extremely innovative contractor categorization strategies used by Fiona's husband's consulting firm. Additionally, the municipal inspection staff would want to look into the code violations on Charlie's homes. People shouldn't be shocked when you cease finding their troubles, empathetic when they believe your suffering is amusement. Every system has enforcement mechanisms. And every enforcement mechanism includes specialists, whose duty it is to ensure compliance. As working with permits shows you, you can create extremely specific issues if you are driven by systemic treachery and have an understanding of how systems operate. Like I was putting together a federal case. I spent Saturday investigating Charlie's real estate holdings. Once you know precisely where to search and what questions to ask, it's amazing what you can find in public records. Charlie has shown to be quite inventive when it comes to code compliance throughout the years. Permits for small-scale remodeling somehow led to significant structural changes. Completed safety assessments were never carried out. Despite being put on paper, fire safety equipment is inexplicably missing from real houses. I toured several of his homes for official paperwork. Simply filming from public spaces. Emergency entrances that were blocked. Apartments with gas appliances and carbon monoxide detectors that were absent. And electrical panels that didn't match the allowed requirements. I submitted 3 different 311 complaints to the city on Sunday morning. Several attributes. Several infractions. Each supported by time-stamped photos and particular code references. I took careful to cite the specific municipal code provisions for each infraction. And I am aware of whose inspectors are in charge of certain areas. The nice thing about code infractions is that the city is required to look into them when they are notified. It is just bureaucrats according to established protocols. It is neither personal nor spiteful. Inspectors are legally obligated to issue tickets and request remedies when they find infractions that precisely match specific complaints. Mike, my contact for the building inspection, called me on Monday morning. Over the weekend, he had drawn 3 separate complaint investigations regarding the same company's properties. It's odd, Nick, how specific these criticisms are. The person who filed them is well aware of what has to be documented and how to present it in a professional manner. They seemed to have had a great deal of regulatory compliance training. That was intriguing. I told him, and I hoped the property owner would take swift action to resolve the infractions. The first concern is always public safety. Charlie was notified by Monday afternoon that 6 homes, not just the 3 I had mentioned, needed thorough safety inspections. The city is usually meticulous about due diligence once they begin reviewing a portfolio. Alyssa, who was hardly able to speak, phoned from an unknown number on Tuesday morning and demanded to know what I was doing to her family. Charlie was apparently in danger of incurring enormous penalties and repair expenses, and everyone thought I was planning some kind of harassment campaign. I informed her that I didn't understand her. Perhaps her father should have maintained his properties in accordance with the law rather than using regulatory shortcuts to increase profit margins if his properties were having problems with code compliance. She said that I was dangerous and insane because I had waged war on her whole family over a relationship issue. I clarified that code enforcement complaints, which are made by concerned residents who see safety infractions, are public records. Inspections wouldn't find any issues if Charlie's buildings were kept up correctly. I heard her telling someone in the background that I was totally insane and that they needed to take action against me before she hung up. I received a call that afternoon from an unfamiliar number, asking whether I was the Nick who had just filed many municipal complaints in a professional manner and making a kind introduction. From Pinnacle Investment Services. This is Blake. I'm phoning to talk about clearing up some recent misconceptions on behalf of a mutual friend. I informed Blake that code compliance was not negotiable and that I was not aware of any misconceptions. There are either safety infractions or none at all. He began to clarify that these technical infractions were only bureaucratic complexities and that Charlie was ready to deal with them right away if certain other issues could be settled peacefully. I urged him to elaborate on these irrelevant issues. For example, Alyssa's business circumstances and perhaps reevaluating certain grievances that may be dropped if everyone could come to an agreement. It dawned on me then that they believed this to be a negotiation. In fact, they thought I was using code enforcement as leverage for interpersonal drama, akin to a hostage scenario in the bureaucracy. I told Blake that code infractions are non-negotiable and that his firm's compliance staff would be interested in trying to organize municipal complaints via personal connections. After being silent, he inquired as to what I meant by it. I proposed that we have coffee together to talk about his company's customer relationship management rules. Just a cordial, yet businesslike discussion. He nodded, but his voice was much less certain than when he'd first called. On Wednesday, I met him in a business area, coffee shop. He arrived just as the entitled investment banker had been cast in central casting. Began telling me that he was processing some challenging feelings and that everyone was under stress because he valued the relationship that Alyssa and I had developed. Relationships, however, may sometimes develop organically. Look, he responded. I understand. Although no one likes to feel replaced, some relationships are just stronger than others. And arguing over that is unfair to all parties. I allowed him to give his prepared statement, in which he described how he and Alyssa had reunited because of their mutual admiration. I questioned him about his client suitability documentation criteria once he had concluded his rambling. His self-assured face instantly changed. Said that I had recently been interested in the criteria for investing compliance, especially with relation to portfolio suggestions that can put advisor compensation ahead of client goals. Just someone who works with regulatory frameworks all the time and has a broad professional interest. He lost the color in his face. What do you mean exactly? Not making any inferences. Just pointing out that, particularly for someone in your position, financial services compliance is much more complicated than relationship turmoil. These days, regulatory bodies take the criteria for appropriateness extremely seriously. In an attempt to become better, he inquired as to how I would be aware of investing restrictions. I'm sure your firm maintains excellent compliance protocols, I stated, referring to the many regulatory oversights, banking compliance, insurance regulations, and professional license standards that come with working on municipal permits. His confidence was beginning to wane when I replied, I just thought you should understand that regulatory issues can be more complicated than personal issues. much harder to resolve through negotiation. What specifically are you hoping to get out of this conversation? I got to my feet and threw a 5 on the table. Nothing. I only wanted to confirm that we were aware of one another's priorities. Then, realizing that things were about to become costly, I left him sitting there. I sent the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority an anonymous tip that afternoon. Only discernible trends in client portfolio suggestions that might call for expert examination. Totally accurate. Well-researched. And disastrous for someone whose livelihood relies on government approval. Mason phoned on Thursday morning to tell that Alyssa had been tweeting about harassment campaigns and toxic individuals on social media. Mason was instructed to take screenshots of everything. I needed full record of precisely how she decided to describe events if this was going to be a public dispute. Blake stopped answering Alyssa's calls by Thursday afternoon. The speed at which amorous gestures vanish when regulatory scrutiny surfaces is fascinating. The 30-day notice period for Alyssa ended on Friday, probably anticipating that legal deadlines would operate like diet programs. She had remained utterly quiet for the whole week. They could disappear if you ignore them a much. The locks were replaced by me on Friday morning. She was a freeloader whose invitation was withdrawn. Not a renter. Thus, it was quite lawful. Left a letter and her belongings in moving boxes at the door. She really lost it when she arrived that same evening in a U-Haul with Sarah, yelling that I was taking her house and abandoning her like trash. All of her wise decisions were going full circle as I took out the receipts, the certified mail notice, the lease that only had my name on it, and her own text about leaving me for Blake. She attempted to assert that she had tenant rights after 2 years of cohabitation. I have looked at that angle before. People who have never paid rent or signed anything are not granted squatter rights under this statute. I'm sorry. She kept wondering where she was meant to go as she was packing her belongings. Blake wasn't picking up the phone. Her parents were losing a lot of money on maintenance for their properties. Fiona was too preoccupied to assist. I advised you attempt that grown-up independence thing. It's popular. I've heard. It was a really entertaining weekend. She burnt through her whole network of friends, leaving desperate voicemails from various phones. As it happens, no one wanted to take in a jobless lady who was having a public breakdown. The greatest thing is that her narrative took a radical turn. She was no longer rejoicing at being free of the dull employee. She was now the target of a campaign of harassment from someone who was incapable of accepting rejection. Claudia called on Sunday evening. She was dissatisfied with my approach and felt that I had to think about my ties with my family. I'm thinking about them. She mumbled about little, non-threatening infractions. And I said, that's why I'm making sure Charlie's buildings don't collapse and kill someone before the city forces him to fix them. She hung up, but I could hear Charlie in the background as I clarified. That's literally what they said about the building that pancaked in Florida. Who makes complaints about family members, idiot? The kind that recalls you're not family. I sent some more paperwork on Blake's imaginative client suggestions to F on Monday morning. I was well aware of the material that would pique their curiosity. In order to share the rent, Alyssa worked retail in Cherry Creek and lived with some acquaintances in Aurora by Monday afternoon. Her design firm had utterly collapsed. No infrastructure, no customers, and no registration. For peanuts. The engagement ring was pawned. It turns out the cubic zirconia in an antique setting was Blake's family treasure. Her jewelry was also bogus. The second, Blake disappeared. Began posing queries. It's funny how romantic vacations in Italy end when your professional license is in jeopardy. I was served after 2 weeks. As a result of my claimed harassment campaign and unlawful eviction, Alyssa was suing me for $15. Nil-inch damages. Her documents claimed that I had unlawfully evicted her from her house and ruined her company out of retaliation. She requested damages for mental suffering, relocating expenses, and missed wages. In the clerk's office, I phoned my friend. He said that paperwork is the key to small claims. Cases are not won by emotions. Documentation does. A federal prosecutor would be envious of the defense I developed. Legal citations for everything. Index tabs. and a 3-ring binder. Lease paperwork. Resignation forms for registered agents. Etc. It was court day, as if I were going to make a case before the Supreme Court. I arrived with my binder. Sarah and Alyssa arrived with no planning. Just 20 minutes of sobbing about our romance and how I had destroyed her life, no paperwork. No investigation. The judge seems to have heard this song many times. I opened the binder when it was my turn. Simple timeline. Your Honor, according to many witnesses, the connection terminated. Business services were discontinued in accordance with state legislation. Colorado laws enforce the lease. Code complaints submitted by citizens who are worried. I was halted by the judge. For each of these statements, what do you have supporting documentation? I gave the binder to her. Everything has an index. Page 47 is where legal citations begin. Alyssa writhed as she flipped through for 10 minutes. You could see the precise instant the judge recognized that this was not a romantic drama. This case involved compliance. Do you have any records proving you were a legitimate renter? Miss Mercer, after 2 years of living there and paying for food, Alyssa began to ramble. She was interrupted by the judge. Utility bills in your name. Lease agreements. Rent receipts. And radio silence. The court decided in my favor in every case, since Alyssa had never bothered with tedious tasks like establishing legal rights. Alyssa has no harm. I was given court costs. Alyssa made one more attempt at guilt-tripping outside the courtroom. I couldn't believe I was taking money from someone who was already having difficulties for such trivial reasons. I mentioned the court charges are $347, not as much as I paid for my own hotel deposits. Much less than the wasted honeymoon preparation you caused me. What's the matter with you? She cried. How can you treat someone you say you love so callously? I felt nothing at all when I looked at this lady who was homeless, poor, jobless, and had been dumped by her investment banker. Nothing. I fell in love with a fictitious character. Your life wasn't destroyed by me. I just quit constructing it for you. She continued to weep. I don't deserve all of this. But I did make a mistake. You're being very mean. You do. Indeed. That was our last conversation. 3 months later, Mason and I struck soul. With someone who really wanted to be there. The vacation I had planned for Alyssa ended up being amazing. Every location on my itinerary was destroyed by us. Night markets. Rooftop restaurants with crazy city views. And my DMZ tour. For the first time in months, I was able to relax, as Mason was snapping pictures like a crazy person. The walking. The language barrier. And the fact that the street food doesn't look good enough for Instagram would have made Alyssa unhappy. I received the information from Denver as we were enjoying some delicious Korean BBQ on Hongdae. FINRA completely devastated Blake. His business revoked his investing license, imposed severe penalties, and issued a formal reprimand. The dream of the Amalfi Coast was canceled for good. Charlie was bleeding out $200. 0 inches penalties and repairs. A number of rental flats were condemned. When he was forced to adhere to real construction regulations, his slumlord empire suddenly became much less lucrative. The Department of Labor was looking into Fiona's husband's inventive contractor categorization schemes. Additionally, Alyssa's design company never recovered while she lived with roommates in Aurora and worked retail in Cherry Creek. She attempted to start again under a different identity. But she lacked customers, a portfolio, and references. The highlight was when Claudia texted me as I was tearing down Galby. Given your extensive knowledge of these systems, would you think about assisting the family in resolving these regulatory concerns? Mason about died laughing when I showed him. My response, I'm in Seoul right now. Having a great trip is to seek advice from qualified experts who bill fairly. No answer. Excellent. Alyssa. Claudia. Fiona. And even Charlie had 17 unread messages when we returned to Denver. All of whom wanted to talk about the matter and find a solution to their regulatory issues. I didn't read them before deleting them all. I filed my papers. My paperwork was finished. Erin is the new female I'm dating 6 months later. She manages her own money, works as an animator, and finds joy in the little things. I saw a familiar blonde hair at the hostess station when we were eating supper at this Korean BBQ restaurant in Cherry Creek, clearly coming off her shift. Alyssa was wearing a shop uniform beneath a cheap jacket and was weary. She was with a strange guy who seemed to be just as broke as she was. When she saw me, her expression alternated between shock, humiliation, rage, and finally despair. I seen her approach our table after explaining something to her date. "Is she there?" Erin muttered. "Yes. This ought to be enjoyable." With that phony, self-assured grin individuals wear when they're about to cause a stir. Alyssa strode up. Okay. Nick and his friend. She evaluated Erin as if he were a rival. "Do you like Korean cuisine? How far-flung? Astute enough to allow insane individuals to speak to themselves." Erin remained silent. "I've heard that you visited Seoul," Alyssa added, raising the volume. "It must have been pitiful to eat just street food." "Oh, what a wonderful vacation. I had a great time with Mason." I spoke in a completely flat tone. "A lad's excursion. Huh, what a tragedy. Blake and I had a great time in Italy. You know, there was nothing wrong with the Amalfi Coast." I took a quick look at her retail attire. "What time was that?" Her face broke. Alyssa went utterly crazy as Erin muttered, "Didn't you say he lost his job, and the Italy thing got cancelled? I apologize. But who the devil are you to make remarks about my relationship?" The whole diner could hear her scream. Erin blinked. "You're disturbing our supper. And I'm his girlfriend." At that point, Alyssa lost it. A girlfriend, oh. Dear. The kind of psychopath you're dating is unknown to you. My whole family was ruined by him. Dead quiet. The servers have frozen. He destroyed my company. Got me kicked out. Caused damage worth thousands of dollars. I didn't want to marry him. That's why. I continued to eat bulgogi as she destroyed herself. Erin tried not to giggle as she watched. When she hesitated, I inquired, "You finished?" I took out my phone and showed her the screen, saying, "Finished? I'm just getting started. Everyone should know what kind of vindictive." Recording application. One-party consent in Colorado. You just slandered someone in front of 30 others. I appreciate the proof. Her face became pale. "Can't you be sued?" "Of course. Likely result in your termination from your retail position." "Have you harassed someone by trespassing? Let's investigate." The manager was already coming, so I gave him a signal. "You have to go." "Ma'am, you're upsetting the consumers." Finally, seeing that 30 others were observing her outburst, Alyssa turned to glance around. She broke up with a man who pretended not to know her. She remarked in a trembling voice, "This isn't over." "Indeed. It is." She bounded out. I saw through the glass as her date left her in the parking lot and drove off, leaving her standing there by herself. The eatery resumed its regular operations, as if nothing had occurred. Erin took up her chopsticks. I grinned and said, "Yep. She's not crazy at all. She never got back to me after that. I don't give a damn. Life is wonderful."